The Dragonback series by Timothy Zahn. Book 2, Dragon and Soldier. Chapter 21.
The air went out of Jack as if he'd been kicked in the stomach. What? He gasped, staring in disbelief at the fireball still hugging the underside of the transport. No, it was impossible. But even as he watched, even as his mind tried to convince itself that he wasn't seeing what he was seeing, a second object rose from the forest and a second explosion blasted at the transport's underside.
That attack was meant for us,
Draco said, his voice low and grim as his head rose from Jack's shoulder.
I see your military vehicles are well equipped with ventral armor.
The words seemed to bounce around Jack's brain like angry hornets trying to get through a window. What are you talking about? He heard himself say.
Ventral armor,
Dracos repeated.
Protection for the underside of the craft, designed to protect the troops being carried.
Jack tore his eyes away from the flying turtle, wavering but still holding together, and stared at the dragon's face. Are you insane? He demanded. Someone just tried to kill us and you're talking equipment specs?
Be calm, Jack,
Dracos advised. With a surge of weight and pressure, he leaped out of Jack's collar and landed on the ground in front of him.
I do not believe they intended to kill you. I believe they meant only to disable the craft so that you could be taken prisoner.
A distant clattering sound wafted toward them on the night air, like a bunch of spoons that had been dropped into a sausage grinder. Jack looked over to find that the flying turtle had finally given up and disappeared into the trees. He didn't have any trouble seeing where it had landed, though. The reddish glow of the fire from its burning fuel tanks was plainly visible. I don't believe this, he muttered. They shot down one of their own transports just so they could grab me again? That's crazy. They already know I can't get them into our computers. Dracos twisted his long neck.
You misunderstand, Jack, he said darkly. It was not the Shamshir who did this.
Jack frowned at him. You can't be serious.
I am very serious,
Dracos assured him.
It was the Wynyard's Edge who shot down the transport.
Well, that doesn't make sense, Jack protested. I was already on my way to meet them. Why shoot at me?
I do not know, Dracos said. But remember, Sergeant Grisco asked if you were strapped in, and he instructed you to keep your course steady.
Oh, it's just a figure of speech, Jack muttered. But even as he argued, he knew deep down that he was batting at flies here. He'd spent over 2 weeks with Grisco, and never in that time had he heard the man utter a single word of concern for anyone's safety. Plus, there'd been that odd tone in his voice just before he signed off. And he and Uncle Virgil had been betrayed too many times over the years for him not to know what it felt like to be stabbed in the back. But why? He asked. What did I ever do to him?
That is what we must find out, Dracos declared.
The dragon had been gazing out at the sky as if trying to find constellations in the unfamiliar star patterns. Now he looked back at Jack and flipped his tail up in front of the boy's face.
The sky is clear of watchers. Take hold.
Wait a second, Jack protested, even as he got a grip on the end of the dragon's tail. Where are we going? Dracos lifted a forepaw.
The transport is there,
he said, pointing a forepaw toward the glow.
The Kilo 7 outpost is there,
he went on, shifting his forepaw about 45 degrees to the right.
Between them is the sentry cage you occupied earlier this evening. I wish to intercept them near there.
Yeah, well, just wait a second, Jack said cautiously. This whole thing had to be some kind of huge misunderstanding. The last thing he wanted was to go for a gung-ho Kada warrior to go off the high dive into the revenge pool. They didn't kill anyone, right? No hospital, no foul? Dracos tossed his head.
You misunderstand, Jack, he said. I do not seek vengeance, but information.
And how exactly do you expect to get it?
We shall see,
Draco said.
Now let us go.
Earlier that night, it was still just the same night. Jack had hurried back from the sentry cage to the outpost. At the time, he would have sworn that it was as fast as it was possible for him to travel through a dark forest without breaking a leg or clotheslining himself on a low-hanging branch. He'd been wrong. He'd been very wrong. They raced through the forest. Not a quick walk, not a cautious jog, but a flat-out run. Dracos was in a hurry, and a Kada warrior in a hurry was a sight to behold. The most astonishing part of it was that Jack never even so much as twisted an ankle. He never did figure that one out. Yes, he knew that Dracos had a different kind of eyesight than humans, which clearly included better night vision along with the rest of the package. And yes, the dragon also had training and experience in moving around different types of terrain. But that only explained how Dracos kept from hurting himself. How he managed to also keep Jack's feet from finding any dips or tree roots along the way remained a mystery. For the first 10 minutes or so, Dracos kept the pace as fast as Jack could manage, stopping every couple of 100 yards for a quick breather. Or at least, that was what Jack first thought the rest stops were for. It was only after the third one that he realized the dragon wasn't so much calling a timeout as he was pausing to listen for signs of their opponents. It was at the 9th rest stop that those sounds began to be heard, at least by Kada ears. From that point on, they walked quietly instead of running. There was no conversation. There was no need for any. Jack might not have Kada military training, but he knew all about sneaking through hostile territory, trying not to be noticed. They had gone another 10 minutes, and Jack had just about gotten his breath back from that mad dash when Dracos abruptly came to a halt. Jack froze in place beside him, listening hard. For a moment, there was nothing. Then, from somewhere ahead, he heard it. A quiet voice, two more acknowledging voices, and then a faint crackle of leaves. Slowly, the crunching sounds moved on.
Careful,
he whispered into Dracos' ear as the sounds faded away.
They might have left a guard behind.
The dragon's tongue flicked out twice, tasting the air.
No,
he whispered back.
All three have gone ahead, but others are moving up behind them.
Jack swallowed. Terrific. What now?
We need information,
Draco said.
We must therefore set a trap. You spoke earlier of electronic detectors.
Abruptly, belatedly, Jack remembered the slapstick at his side. Oh, man, he muttered, snatching it out of the belt like he'd suddenly found a snake right in his hip. I wasn't even thinking.
Calm yourself, Dracos assured him. I allowed you to bring it because it may now be useful. Come.
He headed off at an angle. Gripping the slapstick in one hand and Dracos' tail in the other, Jack followed. The dragon led him in a curving path, stopping at last beside a small tree with slender, multiple trunks poking out from a twisted root system. Here, he said. You may put the weapon down. Jack obeyed. As he did so, something set between two of the thin trunks caught his eye. It was a small plastic object shaped like a curved cone with a flat piece of glass or plastic on the side facing away from him. A thin metal rod connected it to one of the trunks, and he could see a double cable attached to the cone's pointy end hanging down to the ground. And suddenly he realized what it was. That's one of the Argus eyes. Yes, Dracos agreed. Do not worry. We have come up behind it. He reached out a claw and deftly sliced one of the two cables near where it went into the cone. At any rate, they cannot see from it now. Yes, but... With an effort, Jack choked back his protests. If anyone had been looking at the monitor when Dracos cut the cable, he might just as well have sent up a flare announcing where they were. Fine, what now? The dragon's jaw opened slightly. Now, he said, we find you a tree. Jack blinked. A tree? One which will hide you, but which they will not expect you can climb, Dracos continued, looking around. One which, therefore, they will not think to examine. Ah, there, come. He headed off toward a smooth-sided tree that showed a hint of a bush-like branch structure beginning about 50 feet up. Rather like a giant dandelion, Jack thought as they approached.
Hold tightly!
Dracos ordered, leaping a few feet up onto the side of the tree and again wagging his tail into Jack's face. Swallowing hard, Jack got a firm grip on the tail. Without seeming to even notice the extra weight, Draco started to climb. A minute later, they had reached the branches.
This should conceal you well,
Dracos decided, pushing aside one of the leafy branches with his forepaw. Yeah, Jack agreed. Actually, with the way the branches spread out in layers from the trunk, each layer perhaps 3 feet higher up the trunk than the previous one, the setup was like a woody sort of hammock with an overhead canopy. A lot cozier than some of the places he'd hidden out over the years. Provided, of course, you weren't afraid of heights. Where are you going to be? Dracos turned head downward again, gripping the trunk with his claws.
As I said, I will be setting a trap,
He said.
Wait here until I return.
He headed down. Sure, Jack muttered. Whatever you say.